In the name of God, who is love, beloved, and love overflowing. Amen. The Philadelphia Story is a great movie. If you haven't seen it, rent it. It's awesome. The acting is sublime and the storyline moves pretty fast. And as some of you know, it's the story about an elder daughter who is played by Katharine Hepburn, who's from a very wealthy socialite family. She's preparing to be married for the second time to another wealthy guy, but very uptight, I might say, played by John Howard. A few days before her wedding, her ex-husband shows up, played by Cary Grant, and he arrives with a reporter. I mean, this is a socialite family, so it has to be in the papers, right? So Cary Grant shows up with a reporter played by Jimmy Stewart. And they're going to do this grand article on this family. And though Hepburn's character is divorced from Grant, she's still pretty much in love with him, particularly now that he doesn't drink. It does tend to help. And as only Hollywood could do, the night before the wedding, Hepburn's character gets quite drunk, is completely confused as to who she really loves. Her ex-husband, the wealthy socialite man, or even the reporter. It's a mess. The reporter had a mad crush on her, so. And the reason I'm telling you this is because the first thing that came to mind after I read the Hebrew scriptures was Cary Grant in this movie saying, "Oh, how the mighty have fallen." It so happens that Cary Grant's character is now sober, and so he sees Hepburn all drunk and thinks, "Oh, brother, and I was the one who was the problem." But the truth is, we all have feet of clay. They ain't none of us sitting here today, none of us online, nobody on the planet that doesn't make mistakes. Which is a good thing to say now that I realize I forgot to put the new hymns up on the board. Good grief. In the old days, we would quote Paul, who said in the 3rd chapter in his letter to the church in Rome that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Again, in other words, we're all human, and not one of us is the sole beacon of purity and perfection. Saul was a mighty king. David was a mighty king. Solomon was a mighty king. And if you've read anything about them in the Hebrew scriptures, you know that they all had their own unique character defects. I've been thinking about this recently as I approach my 63rd birthday in a few days. Now that most of my life is behind me, I reflect on all the different times that I have behaved selfishly, possibly made poor choices, misunderstood various situations or people. And while I believe self-reflection is extremely important, particularly if we want to evolve spiritually and emotionally, it can also create feelings of humility when we remember how far we have fallen short. And simply because we're human. I mean, that's just the way human beings are. We're all fallible. We're all products of our particular nature and nurture from our family of origin also. So today's psalm does come to mind when I think back on those times in my life when I either really regretted an attitude that I had or a choice that I made or an action I took. Out of the depths have I called to you, O Lord. O Lord, hear my voice. Let your ears consider well the voice of my supplication. If you, Lord, were to note what is done amiss, he would have walked away a long time ago, right? But, O Lord, if you were to note what is done amiss, who could stand? Indeed, Without the power of God working in our lives, I would be long gone, frankly. As a kid from the projects and a daughter of an alcoholic and a person in recovery, by all rights, I should be dead, living on the streets, or in jail. And yet here I am preaching in a church. Never in a million years would I have thought that was going to be my future. Or as we would say, is that odd or is that God? However, there are times when I look back on my life in the past, and I still could cringe a little bit at some of the things I've said or done. But then I remember, I'm still made in the image of God. We all are. God dwells within every one of us and has promised never, never to leave or forsake us in spite of all the poor choices or boo-boos, mistakes, or whatever. And that's when I'm able to practice a little compassion and forgiveness on myself, which makes me wonder if anyone can really practice compassion or forgiveness on anybody else if they don't even know how to practice it on themselves. As one of my teachers has said, if we don't transform our pain, we will most assuredly transmit it. I think that's a powerful saying. If we can't forgive ourselves, I really don't think we're going to be able to practice true compassion as wounded healers, as Henry Nouwen would say. Oh, we can slap a happy Christian face on, say praise Jesus, and show them all kinds of Christian love, and then go home and beweep our manifold sins. But it's fake, it's not real. It doesn't create healed and transformed individuals. It creates puffed up and conceited people. So if nothing changes, nothing changes. We have to be willing to change and be changed. And that takes honesty. In the reading we have today from Paul's letter to the church in Corinth, Paul says, now as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in utmost eagerness, and in our love for you, so we want you to excel also in this generous undertaking. Now, what is the generous undertaking he's talking about? I think he's exhorting us to take the first step in discipleship by taking the first step of transformation, which is the willingness to change. Okay, so you don't want to change something, pray for the willingness to change it. That's the first step, right? You gotta wanna, or nothing is gonna change. To become willing to forgive ourselves for all the times in the past that we've screwed up, to become willing to be compassionate on ourselves when we can no longer do things the same way we used to due to age or trauma or some physical illness of some sort. To begin each new day with an attitude of willingness to make a new beginning over and over and over and over again, even many times during the one day we're in. That's everything. That's everything. The past is over. As we used to say, it's a canceled check. Today is the day that matters. Each new day is a new opportunity to live and practice gratitude just for the gift of life. As one of my teachers, Jim Finley, would say, you know, a lot of people wanted to wake up this morning, but they didn't. And we take that for granted, you know, we do. So, in other words, be willing, or even pray for the willingness to never give up on yourself. I don't know about you. I have been way harder on myself than I have ever been on anybody else. That creates an inside rift of some sort, you know? Never give up on yourself. Yes, never give up on God or your neighbor, but never give up on yourself, because God is still working in you. We have absolutely no clue as to what the future will bring. And we have absolutely no clue as to how our growth in God will bring us to a transformed way of being. We may not always get what we want. You can see the guy already with the big lips dancing, but we will get what we need. Rolling Stones, in case you don't know. I'm a baby boomer, I speak rock. Yesterday, I was at my usual Saturday noonday meeting in AA, and I looked briefly at an app on my phone, which said I was 41 years, 5 months, and 14 days sober, or 15,141 days. And I looked around at all the people in the meeting that I was at, and I realized right before my eyes were true miracles of God. Once hopeless people addicted to a variety of substances, some of which were living on the streets, eating out of trash cans, and yet there they were, all spiffed up, ready to roll for the day, clean and sober, sitting in a room full of people talking about gratitude, and that one day at a time, they were willing to learn how to grow up on a continual basis and turn their life and their will over to the care of God as they understood that. The miracles of God are literally all around us, if we have eyes to see. All it takes is just the smallest amount of willingness to change. So when we hear Paul saying in verse 10, it is appropriate for you who began last year not only to do something, but even to desire to do something. You hear that previous step? First comes the desire to do something, or the willingness to change. Then comes the action. And he says, now finish doing it so your eagerness may be matched by completing it according to what one has, not according to what one does not have. As I said last week, I can't. God can. I think I'll let him. We really can do all things through Christ who strengthens us, if it is the will of God, and if we have the willingness to just do things maybe a little differently. Willingness to change. That's why sometimes when people are a little frustrated, I say, pray for the willingness to change first, right? God, give me the willingness to change this, because I don't like it at all. Not eating ice cream every day. Each new day, and sometimes many times during each new day, we're being asked to practice something I don't think we really give much thought to: willingness. Are you willing to be transformed? I mean, if the church isn't in the change business, we may as well just pack it up and go home. Where else are you going to find on social media or in the media in general a willingness that we might all change? Not other people, but ourselves. It's great. It's real easy to want other people to change. Not quite so easy to be willing to change ourselves without shaming ourselves. That's another key issue. Never underestimate the power of God loving you into acting in your life. God doesn't give you struggles and pain. I hate that saying, oh, God doesn't give you any more than you can handle. What a load of bollocks, as they'd say in England. God doesn't give you struggles and pain, but will use your struggles and pain to bring forth many resurrections. It's not just for the time you die. Every day is a new day. Each day is an opportunity for a new resurrection. from our old self to a new self, until one day we cross over and the scales of delusion fall off our eyes and we finally see ourselves as God has always seen us, as beloved children of God. In the meantime, you and I have a teeny weeny little glimpse of the miracles of God all around us, and who so wants to work in our life the same kind of miracle of transformation if we only just become willing to change. And that brings us to our gospel reading. The first thing that came to my mind when I read today's gospel passage is that God is not only active in the world in general, but in all the various interruptions we experience in life. Think about it. There Jesus was, busy as always. He was always busy, going from thing to thing, person to person, situation to situation. And he's constantly interrupted, right? Interrupted by people all over the place who need a blessing of some sort in their life. And today's interruption is a woman with some kind of medical issue who's desperate for healing. No doubt about it, she had a willingness to be changed, right? She had to plan how she was going to sneak up behind him and grab a hold of his cloak. That was a plan. She somehow knew that if she would just touch and be touched by Jesus, she too would be healed. Now, whether or not she received physical healing or emotional healing, who knows and who cares, quite frankly. In some way, shape, or form, Jesus turned, made her face him, and instead of the shame I'm sure she always received, was told that God loved her just as much as anybody else standing there. Frankly, I think that was the healing she received, the healing of being ashamed of herself. Jesus made the time to value being with her, even while on his way to a serious appointment or a serious ministry. Her shame was healed. That's a big deal. I mean, how many of us, as I said, look back on the mistakes we've made sometimes, and that feeling of shame just goes right through us. I've said for years, ministry happens in the interruptions of life. When you least expect it, an opportunity for healing and blessing happens, and sometimes even to you and me. And actually, it's better we don't actually expect it or seek it out, so we don't try to take credit for it. The ones who do take credit for it and think they're all that end up becoming the mighty who have fallen. So today's message, I think, is hope. Not that it isn't hope on any other day, but that was the message I really felt coming from the scriptures today. Because the experience of the psalmist who wrote Psalm 130 is our experience. Anyone who calls on the Lord out of the depths of despair, shame, or confusion, anyone who waits for the Lord for healing, for attention, for growth, there is plenteous redemption. What a beautiful bunch of words that is. Plenteous redemption. It always reminds me of that gorgeous saying, a gracious plenty. You don't hear that up north. I can tell you that right now. With all our willingness to change and God's love, all things are possible. Amen.